Hi guys, my name is Albert, and that's my speech. Ask yourself this: what are we really eating in America today? Well, today, as much as 80% of conventional processed foods contains genetically modified organisms, commonly known as GMOs. And what GMOs are organisms whose genetic material has been genetically engineered, has been genetically altered using genetic engineering techniques. And these organisms have been introduced to the United States as early as the 1990s. And for many years, it is believed that these organisms pose a threat to today's consumers. And while some people believe that these GMOs are beneficial and have an efficient role as the growth for animals and plants, many believe, and statistics and researchers show that they have proven otherwise. So my claim here today is that GMOs pose more of a threat to its consumers than a benefit. And that leads me to my first supporting claim, and that's the most direct way that GMOs affect an organism, and that is through natures, like animals, plants, soil, basically its environment. And so Roundup, which is the primary chemical that makes up GMO, has found to exist in soils, waterways, and other water resources. And this Roundup, along with other GMO byproducts, have shown that these chemicals actually degrade into the soil. And so essentially what that means is it basically strips away the soils from its vital minerals as well as its beneficial bacteria that it needs in order to grow healthily. And so GMOs are also responsible for killing off animals like bees, bats, and butterflies and other pollinators, and that's because these organisms' bodies, they're unable to handle the altered DNA and the chemicals that make up the GMO technology. And according to Institute Responsible Technology, genetically modified crops and their herbicides can harm birds, insects, amphibians, marine ecosystems, and soil organisms. And so with these crops, these genetically modified crops actually reduce the biodiversity and they pollute water resources too. And so moving on to my second supporting claim, GMO foods have a negative effect on its consumer. And what I mean by consumer is us. One dangerous effect that the GMO brings is its decreased nutritional value. And so once a food is fused with these unnatural genes, the food actually begins to lower its nutritional quality from its traditional state. So some of these ingredients are actually not digestible for humans, so that can harm our bodies. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that GMO products can cause an allergic reaction. And so according to Ryan's Nutrition, since the introduction of GMOs in the mid-1990s, the number of food allergies has skyrocketed, and health issues such as autism have been on the rise. And so GMO foods have seemed to be causing parallel autism symptoms in animals. And so 20 years ago, autism was rare, but for example, in today's nation, 1 in 54 boys are diagnosed with autism, and these numbers have changed since the GMOs have been introduced in our nation. One of the most shocking research results that have been presented from GMOs is the genetically modified corn linking to cancer tumors. And so testing on the animals, when the lab rats consumed this GMO corn, they began to develop tumors, widespread organ damage, and premature death. And my final supporting claim is that the GMO foods contaminate, and it's really hard for this contamination to get rid of. And so GMOs, they can cross-pollinate, and their seeds can travel. And so it makes it become almost nearly impossible to completely clean a contaminated gene pool. So GMOs make up 70 to 80% of our foods in the United States today. Most foods contain GMOs are processed foods, but they also exist in the form of natural crops. And so this contamination has caused economic losses for farmers who struggle to keep the crops pure. And so sadly, these farmers become the victim of this cross-pollination, and they find themselves subject to lawsuits. And according to GMO Awareness, Monsanto, which is an agricultural company, has repeatedly filed lawsuits against these farmers who have harvested genetic modified crops mixed into their non-genetic modified crops. So basically, some farmers had no choice but to get contaminated because of other crops nearby that had these genetically modified organisms in them. And despite these farmers' defense, they're still found guilty. Genetically modified foods throughout the years have brought many controversial claims, and many institutions and farmers have been sued and shut down because of it. But in the United States today, there still remains unlabeled foods in markets that consumers are not aware of, which can also pose a threat. And without the labeling on these foods, the consumers are not aware of the danger that these GMO foods have on its consumer. And so researchers have linked these products to many diseases, cancer, and even death that some GMOs breed. And so that concludes me to my question I proposed in the beginning, and that's what are we really eating in America today. Thank you.
All right, Albert, the proposition's clearly identified at the beginning, so that's solid. I think there's plenty of controversy on the subject. Most people have probably heard a little bit about that, so you're okay there. I do think you need a better preview at the beginning of the speech other than just the proposition. That's not enough to tell us exactly where you're going. Internally, you do signpost the secondary claims pretty clearly, except that that first point was not really stated as a very distinct claim. It sounds like it's an expository statement rather than a declarative statement. The second and the third points, I think, were a little bit clearer, mostly because of the way the topic is stated rather than the claim that's being made. You do try to explain issues during the course of your argument, and I thought that you did an okay job explaining concepts. The part where there's a little bit of a problem is demonstrating those concepts. I think you probably had research that you used in putting your speech together, but it's not cited very clearly in the speech. And we get a lot of vague references to studies that say this, or it's been reported that, or here's a statistic, and we don't know where it comes from. In the last section, for instance, there's a story about Monsanto filing lawsuits and farmers going out of business. And I'm going, okay, so where does this come from? Give me the name of a farmer. Tell me what happened, and I don't get anything except vague references there. On an earlier point, there was a claim that bats and bees are all wiped out by the kinds of things that come from genetically modified foods, and the only evidence that you had on that point that dealt with it was a very generic piece of testimony that talked about it can have an effect on flora, fauna, insects, and that sort of thing, and that's about as close as you get to identifying honeybee hive collapse on genetically modified foods or the failure of bats to pollinate on the same issue. I think that there's a huge inferential leap that's being made there. There's a similar problem with the statistic that you had on autism, which is the one, you've got a statistic on the uptick in autism, particularly among boys. However, the correlation to genetically modified foods is tangential at best. It's, that it started at a particular time. There could be a lot of explanations here. If there is a scientific explanation about what the relationship would be, you need to back that up, and you need some testimony to go along with that. Otherwise, all you've got is this strange statistical link, and there are lots of similar kinds of statistical links that would not generate the same conclusion that you're presenting there. I think you're a little low key. Sometimes you need to put a little energy into the presentation also. All right, thank you.